Brad Brown, hailing from the great state of North Carolina, Tar Heel State. And I realized, again this morning as I was shaving, that there's some gray hair. So I have been doing this quite a while, going on 30 years, and we'll talk about that. And we'll also practice some things that I hope we can do with students, with parents, and with our colleagues. So yes, we're going to talk about digital opportunities, and it's just like anything else. This, again, I'll say opportunities, and it's our mindset around it. It's what's going to help us be better consumers and help our classroom have a better cultural opportunity for that. And so bear with me as we blend some opportunities in there to again, just staying curious. And so again, we're one of 9 ESDs here in the great state of Washington, and I say one of 9. And at this particular one, I want to give you just some information for context. It's basically 2 counties, King and Pierce County, which represents about 40% of the state's student population. So a lot of opportunity. Another piece of context. Within this region, there's about, roughly 200, I like to say roughly 206 languages spoken. That's, again, a lot of communication opportunities, a lot of richness. And we look at that because that is what our industry is needing. And we're all connected, whether we choose to be or not. And so giving you an idea of that. And as far as public schools, public school districts, I should say, we support about 35 and over 200 private and other smaller schools and school districts. So we all have an opinion. And it is just like anything else we talk about. And so I want us to hold some agreements. And these are used within conversations around race, but these are also good in conversations about just setting a mindset of just staying curious, right? And so it is stay engaged. Experience discomfort. Hey, oh man, I don't know how I feel about AI or whatever. Oh man, Instagram is the devil. Like there's a myriad of things to be said. And so I would just hold a mindset of just curiosity, and then speak your truth. And expect and accept non-disclosure. We don't have to have the answer now. I know we're close to Microsoft, but I know that people feel differently about Google and Teams and Zoom, et cetera. And some of us are in therapy from those conversations. And intent versus impact, right? We're still learning this thing. When we talk about technology and education, it's bigger than the iPhone, right? For some of us, technology could be an Atari, right? And some of us might even know what the heck an Atari is, right? But at any rate, it's all of those things, right? Because that is our experiences, and I want us to hold that word too, because it's going to make us and help us be better consumers and supporters of technology. Any questions about this? No?
Well, I guess what I want to ask at Learning Council Media is, what's happening on the ground around us?
What's happening on the ground around us?
Yeah.
So if I had to ask that question in a literal way,
Yeah.
and I know you mean it not so literal, but abstractly, the fact is we're not necessarily on the ground anymore. We're in the clouds, pun intended. It is amazing to think that I went from the one red button joystick to now we have children that are playing games with children all over the world. There is intentional elementary schools that are partnering with schools all over the world. And some amazing learning is happening because of that. Amazing. And dreams are happening. And I know this technology, but that's what all technology was before it was dreams. So we'll talk about that between what does digital look like with the human interaction, right? Because things are going to continue to happen for us. And AI is not going to do it all for us. It still has a human touch to this. So when we say what's happening on the ground, I was a part of Kent School District, and it was the first Microsoft district. And we did some bold moves. Our goal starting out in high school was to put a laptop in every student hand. And the purpose wasn't because we were trying to support laptops or make backpacks heavier so kids could be in shape. No, it was to support and bridge that gap and provide other opportunities for students to access information, to stay curious, to wonder, to dream, to invent, to expand, to experience. And that was the purpose of that. So when you say what's happening on the ground, that movement is still happening. Our opportunity is how are we creating space for it to happen more intentional, right? And make mistakes, but not have the mistakes be as dramatic. Does that make sense? Because this is new. And we're asking students, we're also asking adults. And so to your question, I have a question. And my question is, in elementary school, how many of you had a computer lab? Elementary school? How many? Oh. How about middle school? Computer lab.
Yeah.
Okay. High school, computer lab.
Yeah.
Okay, so high school. And then in college, computer lab. And what were you using to transfer information? Were you emailing or were you carrying around this thing they call the floppy? Floppy? Right? I know, it's like, man, we were actually doing that. So I was having a conversation with a colleague that was our digital person in terms of what was on the ground. And that's why I like, as we talk about technology, we can get into that. But again, for us in this world of education, there is a culture. And what we know about teaching is that teachers, educators, tend to teach the way they were taught. Because that was their what? Experience. Yes? Yes. And that is why, at times, as a recovering middle school principal, when we walk through and we see, and unfortunately this is being recorded, but we see sometime on a smart board, there is poster paper over it. Right? But those are the truths. And when I was talking to Michael today, it's like, what was that about? And even with having the laptop, even with having access, is then how do we support the experience? And part of that is going to involve, that we talk about later, is that a piece where traditionally the answers have come from one source. And the goal of this digital learning experience is like, we all now are sources of learning. Students do have the opportunity to access and contribute and even lead some of this. And I'm gonna go a step further, but I'm gonna pull myself back. But I want you to hold that as we're also in this state about to launch into something called student growth goals. And I want you to be very intentional about the first word in that is student growth goals. And it'll be a new way in terms of how we're thinking about student learning and knowledge accessibility. So hold that, because in the end, this is still about student success and growth.
Brad, can I just say something?
Yes, please.
I think what I heard is that also in the equity lens, you just framed the digital utilities as also social emotional.
Yep.
Which is an interesting way to frame the conversation. I don't think I've heard that before, but I really agree with you on that, because we've been studying the Generation Alpha, and they don't like people as much as they like screens.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, if we think about the experience that our children have, and when I say our children, like I have 2 teenage children that tolerate me now, that we live with now, and they're very much so interactive, and they're very much so involved in speed. I also have the blessed pleasure of having an older daughter that now she works in the tech industry as a woman of color, and I'm going to tell you, she's on Slack 24/7. The information, it's just a different experience, right? And it doesn't mean that we take away the human touch. We'll talk about that. But it's like, how are we intentionally making space so that people can engage, students can engage in a way, teachers can engage in a way that's different, and it increases the opportunity. And so it's not like getting rid of anything. And I will use one more woeful analogy when I was talking about this with Trent Palm, our director of education here. It's like where we are now, we have to get to a point of acceptance. We're not going back. And so it's like, how do we learn about the things we're consuming and creating? And we can look at it just like food. Our kids have to eat. They're going to eat. How will we know and learn about what it is they're eating? How will we be curious about what it is that we're eating, right? And we can talk about Instagram and all those things. At the same time, those very things that contingent upon the lens that we see as harmful have done an amazing job at including kids that didn't have a space before. We're no longer just looking at a book, and I'm going to say it, of just like old white faces. Kids are now learning a myriad of things through this opportunity. Like, it's mind-blowing of what can happen and what is possible. And so I want us to hold that. And again, this is our kids' world now. It's not just the block, right? And it's not to get rid of that, but it's the understanding of what's transpiring, right? Yeah. So, anybody seen this before? No? So, at first I was like, oh, should I run and read through this? And in the way I would best say that we should look at this is like, there isn't a 1-2 punch. I'm going to stay with that food analogy. I would encourage us to look at this as a complete meal, not just one piece. Guy, I know depending upon who you talk to, like this would be, like they would live in this place, right? Any of you all chiefs of technology folks, right? Like this is a huge, right? This is huge. And one of the things we do talk about, if we think about this too, is we share this with our students. We're talking about citizenship, right? How are we engaging? What are we putting out? The validity of it, intentionality. Are we using it to harm? But this is such an important way to look at this. And again, when I say and talk about, say, using the food analogy, it's the combination to create a healthy diet. Is that better? Right? And so I use this so I could try to bridge, because again, based on your experience and how we present this, will determine how we're able to better embed this in the classroom.
My question, yeah. So is this actually mandatory subject-based curriculum now, or is it sort of skittering in different areas?
We have ISTH. It's the state standards for technology. So there is standards for technology. Anybody familiar with those? Yeah. So there are standards, and it goes beyond the 1 day of coding. Okay. So I want us to hold that. And again, here's one thing I am learning to try to be better at. There is a myriad of places we can improve. And if we're asking educators, teachers, principals, et cetera, to lean into this, the first thing we can't do is run off and compare them and say, oh, they code every day and such. We only do 1 day of coding here. I would say staying curious and asking questions. of what their experience is. Because if we're asking people to be better at something, we have to do just like we do with anything else. And where are the strengths? Where are you starting from? And that means for some of us that had a different experience and still don't know what a floppy disk is, and if I pull out a rotary phone and set that in front of my daughter and she says, "What is this?" Like, different experience. So I just want us to hold that in terms of the culture we're building, and also be on the other side when my daughter introduced me to Google Lens. Anybody ever heard of that? Know what that is? Yeah, I was addicted for like a week. I'm just taking pictures of everything, right? It's fascinating. But again, it's experience, and she led me to that, right? And my world has, just opened up. So I think this is a great place to start, to understand this. And when you begin the conversation, and again, I'm couching using words intentional, because what I have learned in my short 30 years is like conversation happens before the change. You can't mandate kindness, right? There's some things, and in a culture where it has very much traditionally been adult-driven, independent, it's going to cause for conversation. So whether it's you in a PLC with your colleagues, or you as a staff leader, it starts with a conversation. Okay. Yeah. Any questions about this? Yes.
Hey guys, you can ask questions too. I feel like what's happening now, and maybe this is unique to here, but it's happening all over the country. We have digital literacy as like a subject overlay, and it's a whole world of experience, like you've been saying. And then at the same time, we execute on a totally different analog experience. We haven't meshed the two. We treat this as an alternate universe and brush over it just a little bit, while maintaining our old universe, which is alien ground.
Yep.
For a lot of kids now. It's like, please enter this alien world, and we will just mildly talk about your real world, which is there. So when do you think it's going to flip?
I believe. Well, I mean, like I said, we're not going back. We're not. If we look at some of the things that are growing, like esports, it's huge.
Huge.
It's huge.
Yeah.
I mean, and I say this to say it's like, and again, I'm going to adults first, because what I've learned when it comes to building schools is it's amazing when the adult behavior makes the transformation. Whether that's around school discipline, whether that's around a new adoption of a curriculum, it really drives how we get there. The flip begins to, well, I'll say for me, I see places where it is beginning to happen. And I think high schools are a great breeding ground for this, because we have high school students now, again, I'll call it a COVID blessing. We had high schoolers that were able to invent things and patent things and find ways to make a means of money. And I know that might not be a driver for some, but what that does is give us an idea and a peek into what's possible. I'll give you one more, and I took this slide out. I did have a slide in here. Has anyone seen the movie, oh man, I messed the title up, but the boy that rides the wind, a boy that harnessed the wind? What was that about? Anybody want to tell me about that? What was the movie about?
Making windmills out of recycled materials from the junk carrier.
Right. So a student in Africa making windmills out of basically trash, garbage. And this is a true story, this isn't Hollywood. And some of his biggest barriers, but that was also his biggest support to end that was a teacher. That, again, I want you to hold that power. a teacher gave him a look into what's possible. And at the same time, some of the closest ones that didn't understand or didn't see was saying, hey, we're going to die if we stay here. The movie's about the kid that harnesses that to bring the world in the drought, right? But that is such a powerful example of what is happening. And it literally saved the lives of many. So when we talk about things like, when will it flip, when will it change? And I would say the more we're better able to at least have the conversation. And I know this, that when we begin to mandate something, and again, adults and kids are no different sometimes, because as soon as you tell some children not to do, what happens? They do. And sometimes if adults feel like they don't have a say or don't have a sense of understanding or an entry, right? Where can I enter into this conversation? Does that help? Where can I enter in the conversation, right? Where's the enter part? But I can tell you this, because we work with what we call pathways, and we talk with folks in the industry. And one of the number one things they say they look for when they're looking for employees is this right here. Creativity. People say, oh, it's great, collaboration. But still somewhere there's got to be a creative way of, I can see what Leilani, like there's a connection here. And so think of this as entry points. And I think for teachers that have had, like myself, the floppy disk experience, I think it becomes more edible. I'm going back to the food analogy, right? Anybody had breakfast this morning? So I think that's where we have to hold that. And so language is so powerful. Because if we just talk in a language that the culture isn't ready, so it makes them less resident to receive it. Does that make sense? I appreciate y'all for the head nods. And I don't want to read slides, but I also had a set of questions. And I could go on and on about the things we have seen from students during COVID that use technology to come up with just some amazing pieces, right? And yes, they're one-offs, but they also are inspiring people to become more curious. And so I would say part of our opportunity is to stay curious about things like that, right? Part of our thing is to lift up those stories that transpired in Africa, right? Like those are powerful things where technology saved the lives of many and also just created literal food, right? No analogy there, it's like real food. So I just want us to hold that. A lot of words, very important. And here's where I'm going to try to do my best to pause. And this is talking about data literacy. I'd like for you to read both of those paragraphs and just find a word or phrase that connects to you.
Is this off of our handout on the data literacy, or is this?
Some of it is. I found ways to cross-weave that. And because we're educators, and we tend to love research, so I put some good research institutions in there. I want to give them the credit. So it's intentionality, right? Does everyone have a word or a phrase they want to hold? Yes? So I'll ask, what stands out? Why does that stand out to you?
It stands out to me because I'm trained as a corporate officer in analyzing not just data, but situations. So data literacy to me is not just numbers or graphs. It's situational. What is sticking out as the problem point? So it's a logic discipline. So I love the fact that you put in behavior, because I don't really believe that a lot of teachers are trained into logic. It's a very emotional field, education.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not necessarily always logical. Just to criticize just a little bit. I love you, but that's just what I'm saying. So I like that.
Okay. Behavior. Come on, people.
I liked, as the teacher grows in data fluency, they create better assessments and
Mm.
I think as a teacher, that's something that I learned once I understood what looking at data was, and I had to be kind of taught that. The much better teacher I became, but that's not the same as she's saying. That's not always something that we get intentionally taught as a teacher.
One more?
Action.
Say more, please, sir.
So, oftentimes, we have this term we call dead data. It's data that just kind of sits and stagnates for a while. And once we get to the point of review, it's so far gone that it really doesn't have any application. So the concept of actionable in this case means that you're closing the feedback loop. And we talk a lot about closing feedback loops for students and for people that are responsible for student success directly or indirectly. And I like the concept of action. Just getting there is a challenge because of tradition more than anything.
I appreciate that. Any more? One more? Oh, come on.
Mine is actionable instruction materials. Because it goes with, it's about instruction and students and the work of education. So, that data that Jimmy's talking about.
Anyone else? Again, I had to calm myself because this was exciting to me because I know as a state, I'm also part of a state group as well with statewide leaders, and I don't know if you all heard of a book called Street Data.
Sounds good.
Well, it lends itself to what you're talking about, right? It talks about not just the traditional, but street data talks about situational, meaning that part of our data isn't always dead data or hard data, but it's the experience and staying curious about what it is a student is bringing into the classroom. It's all data. Because if our goal is to help them be successful, right? And that is, and possibly learning about what type of technology they may have or may not have at home. But it also might mean, what does home mean or look like for you, right? And so not only is we have an opportunity to change for some, the idea that technology is sectioned off or is something that is cold and hard. Our data is something that's cold and hard, but data does have life. It has a pulse. It has a heartbeat, right? It's more than just those digital on paper. And I love the fact that it is instruction. It is an instructional tool when harnessed. It helps make moves. It depends on where you start, where you end, or where you let go. Discovery, right? Here's where I stop and you start. And still, when I do that, I'm still doing what? I'm still collecting some level of data, right? I'm floating, like, that's exciting to me because that is access points for students. That should be exciting for teachers too, and it's in a powerful way to engage students because it doesn't always lead to one narrow point. It creates space. And we know that kids operate better when they feel like there's more space because they need to move in this thing with their brain, right? It needs to be flexible. So I want us to hold that, and here's where too, as we think about our district administrators, what does that mean? What does that look like? As we put out those, again, mirror first, right? We put out those district assessments. What does those mean? What do those look like? How interactive are they? What does that mean? What are we measuring? What are we gathering? But then, again, it's not to, I just want to get away from the next, but just like staying curious about what that means, right? And then how does that influence and lift up assessment and getting beyond just because you're sitting in the seat that everyone has same. Thank you for sharing that out. Okay, so I'm gonna have to put. So what an amazing opportunity. So here's where I'll be maybe not so blunt, but let me tell you this. If we didn't know, we definitely know now that there is an amazing opportunity for us to be better at using technology in the classroom. Because what COVID told us was we were put in a situation to where schools shut down, and we said, what's your name, sir?
Jeff.
Joe?
Jeff.
Jeff, just teach online. Right. Just teach online. And then it was like, wait a minute, but Jeff wasn't trained on that. Jeff knew his content. Did he know the tools? Did he know like the citizenship? Did he know about the? Oh, so I want us to hold that because it was amazing to me how when we weren't getting the results we wanted from online learning, how quick we blamed who? The kids don't care. Kids aren't showing up. The kids. But we weren't ready either. And so I'm saying this not to blame the system. What I'm saying is that should be a reflection for us. We should be ready, right? And so how have we gotten better? How have we reflected on that opportunity? Because I can tell you, I wouldn't be ready either. And so I'm saying it's not about placing blame. It's like, okay, how do we learn? How do we show students? How do we show parents? How do we show our community that, man, COVID was bad in a lot of ways, and we sent students home to learn from a lot of folks that maybe were using a floppy disk when they were in high school. Again, I want us to hold that experience, right? I said it for a reason. And I say that to say, this is why we have to continue to lean into this. And when we were involved in this, we had a number of districts, and I feel blessed, that could put together just a platform, but for us, like the support around the training, around the understanding of tools, the different mediums, because we also have to remember this too. And we had this conversation here. One of the beautiful things about being here is we're able to pull superintendents together and have that conversation. And some of our data was teachers are parents. I'm going to say that again. Teachers are parents. So they're trying to figure this out as parents as well. So when we talk about data literacy, like this is such an eye-opening experience of why this cannot be, to your point, this cannot be something that's siloed. We have to lift this up. And I'm going to take his question before I keep going. Yes, sir.
It was more a comment that I had with my daughter's third grade teacher when COVID happened.
Come on.
Ran into her as she was cleaning out her classroom and collecting some instructional materials to take home. And she talked about the impact of what she was seeing in terms of the stress that caused.
Oh.
And those who were ready to flex
Yeah.
were ready to flex. Unfortunately, she was, and others were in our district for our kids. But then I watched my son's 8th grade teacher last year, his math teacher, implode. And I'm not picking on Aries, but they had top-down Aries into the district without the conversation about why we need that literacy. And the stress points to me and how this interacts. And my question is this: how are you thinking about SEL in the context of digital learning?
That is phenomenal and great. And I'm going to give you one quick example, and I got this from the students. And by the way, we're holding the MLL consortium right next door. And when we talk to our students and I ask them what's one of the best ways in which, again, this state is the #1 state in second location opportunities, meaning that folks that come from other countries to the United States, the #1 place they move once they land here is Washington State. So, with that said, again, I look at that data point as an opportunity. And they tell me the #1 way in which they learn language is by watching soap operas or some level of TV. That's from the students. And I'll tell you the school was from Mill Creek in Kent. So I'm saying that, but that's them finding out. We can enhance that, right? We can improve that and be even more intentional with this experience. And COVID taught us that we should. And whether it's special education or whether it's ELL or MLL, that should not be a K-12 life sentence. I'm going to say it shouldn't be a life sentence. If you get this quote unquote labeled in 3rd grade, you shouldn't have it in 12th grade. We should be able to, right? I believe we can do that. And I'm getting the hook. And lastly, because this is, so I want to talk about cross-cultural, and I'm going to hold this last piece. You can read both, but I'm going to ask someone to read this last part out loud because it makes me levitate. Who wants to read that out loud? Like they're ready to read with their full body and they had like half a cup of coffee. Or better yet, who has the vision to see what that says?
Benefits of cross-curricular instruction by mixing and blending academic subjects together. Students can combine something they're passionate about with something they might not be. It helps with real-world problem solving and critical thinking skills.
Whew. Come on. Come on. You want to talk about absenteeism? You want to talk about behavior issue? Like, come on.
And that was 2004.
Yes. So again, I'm not. Yeah. But here we go again. We're still having this same conversation though, right? Because there is opportunity, and here's how we know we have data to feedback. Who here has children living in their home, right? Have you came home at whatever time, seen your child in front of a game or a computer, whatever, left, went up, probably made the bed, done something, and come back an hour and a half later and that child was still there? Have you experienced that? Right. Learning can be that same way. And I'm not saying that they have to be playing a video game. What I'm saying is this helps bridge that gap. That's a fact. And that's exciting for me because that's one less student that's a behavior problem. That's one less student that got a label and may have needed it in special ed, ML, right? Like I see this as possibilities. So how do we use technology, link that to passion and problem solving? Limitless. And that's what's exciting to me because there are so many kids that are waiting for this. And I know that teachers out there like yourself can provide this. So that's exciting. I have to cut and go. And yes, I'm ready now. I'm pumped because this can happen. This did happen. This does happen. And they're actually happy to be there and see you, right? And this is what we're working on. Thank you for your time.
Big round of applause.
All right,
everybody.
appreciate
That
you.
was awesome. I'm going to totally tie into everything you said. So you and I are going to have like an ongoing conversation